Hey, this is Gretchen Menn with Acoustic Guitar, and today we're going to be wrapping up the series that we've studied together and looking at some diatonic harmonic progressions. So you've worked hard in this series to build a solid foundation of music theory and applying all of those concepts to the fretboard. And in this final lesson, we're going to connect a few extra dots, apply them to the fretboard, and get you going on writing some of your own music. First, my congratulations. What you've accomplished this far is no small feat. You've looked at the elements of pitch and rhythm, you've worked to understand time signatures and key signatures, and you've gone through a whole variety of exercises to both get you familiar with theoretical concepts and apply them to the fretboard. So in this final video, we're going to be looking at bringing everything together and looking at the principles of diatonic harmony. So this is going to be a very dense lesson. I know a lot of them have been, but this one most certainly is. So if you're not fully alert and ready to tackle it, take a nap, do some exercise, get some caffeine, strap in, and let's have at it. Western tonal music, in its most fundamental form, is about tension and resolve. And there are countless ways to navigate degrees of tension and resolve through harmonic progression, which is the movement of one chord to the next. So we've already looked a little bit at chords in our previous lesson, but here we're going to go in a little bit more deeply. So every key has an associated scale, and every scale has triads or harmonies that are built on each scale degree. So while we have looked at some of that in the blues lesson, here we're really going to dissect it more. We'll start with the major mode. So the tonic is the chord of resolve, of rest, repose, and it's juxtaposed against the dominant chord, which is the chord of tension, and that is built on the 5th scale degree. The subdominant chord is built on the 4th scale degree, and it often precedes the dominant in harmonic progression. So while the tonic, subdominant, and dominant all have specific chords associated with them, meaning the 1, the 4, and the 5 respectively, each chord in a key can serve one of those functions of tonic, subdominant, or dominant. Let's put that into practice by actually spelling out the diatonic chords of a C major scale. First, write out the C major scale as in example 1. So we'll be starting on C and then constructing your major scale, which will be C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. Start with the root, C. To get to the 3rd of the chord, we're going to skip a scale degree and get E. That will be your 3rd. Skip another scale degree to get your 5th of G. Now, using what you've learned from the intervals lesson, let's take a look and we will analyze the intervals. So between C and E is a major 3rd, right? 2 whole steps. C to D is a whole step, D to E is a whole step. So that's your major 3rd. And then C to G is a perfect 5th. So that gives you a major chord, meaning that your tonic chord in the key of C major is a C major, which you might have expected, but now you know why. Now we'll move on to the 2nd scale degree, which is D, and we'll use the same procedure. So D is your tonic. We'll skip 1 scale degree to get our 3rd, which will then be F, and then 1 more scale degree to get the 5th, which is A. Analyzing the intervals now, we have D to F, which is a minor 3rd, right? D to E is a whole step, and E to F, it's a half step between natural notes, so that's a minor 3rd. And then D to A is a perfect 5th, which gives us a minor chord. So the chord built on the 2nd scale degree of a major scale, in this case D, in the key of C major, will be a minor chord, in this case D minor. So continue that same procedure for the rest of the key, and you can double check yourself through example 2. You'll notice that all of the chords in a major mode are either major or minor with one exception, and that's the chord built on the 7th scale degree, which is diminished. Using the same process now as example 2, let's do the same thing for the minor mode in example 3. We're going to take the key of A minor, which is the relative minor of C major. You'll notice when you write out first the scale and then all of the triads that, as you might expect, relative keys which share the same notes will also share the same chords. But it's specifically context and progression that determines how we hear a key and why we hear A minor, C major, or any 2 relative keys as independent keys. Often the minor mode will borrow the leading tone or the raised 7th scale degree from the major mode. So if you look at example 4A, we've written out an A minor scale. So those notes are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then your tonic of A. What that means is that we'll take the raised 7th, so in the case of A major, that would be the G sharp. By borrowing the leading tone from major, you create that stronger pull between your 5 chord and your 1 chord. Let's take a look at that. So we're going to take an E minor chord, which will be your 5 in the key of A minor, and we're going to play it like this, just with these 3 voices. So you have G on the D string at the 5th fret, B on the G string of the 4th fret, and E on the 5th fret of the B string. So there's E minor, and now we're going to slide up to A minor. So that's your 3rd finger on the 7th fret of the D string, your 1st finger barring at the 5th fret on the G and B strings. So 5, 1. Now if we raise this this 3rd of the 5 chord, which is your 7th scale degree, right? So we have G, which is the 7th of A, and instead we use G sharp, right? I'm going to finger it like that instead. What you have so you hear that leading tone, the G sharp resolving to your tonic. This is an extra credit one because it isn't written as part of the examples, but a lot of times it can be easier to hear voice movement if it's in one of the upper voices. So we're going to take the E minor chord. So that's at the 2nd position. We've got E with our 1st finger on the D string. We have B with our 3rd finger on the G string, E with your 4th finger on the B string, and G with your 2nd finger of the E string. So you have E minor. And now we're going to move to your A minor, so just by, so 5, 1. But now if we want to make this E minor and E major by putting in that raised 7th scale degree, right? So you have your 7th of G. We now get this voicing of the chord. You can see that movement? Your 3rd just moves up a half step. And now you have that stronger pull to your tonic. So now let's take some common progressions and we will transfer them to the fretboard. I'm going to be recommending that we start with just the top 4 strings, and it's for 2 reasons. First, I find these very aesthetically useful voicings. You'll hear when we start playing them. But also because guitars so often think bottom note up, they almost just will think, okay, here's my A, so now here's my A major chord form. By inverting the process and kind of thinking top note down and playing the chords on strings that are maybe not as used for a lot of guitar players, we disorient ourselves, and that forces us to get reoriented, engage our brain, and deepen our knowledge. Example 5. Write out all of the chords of G major. Start by writing out a G major scale and using the same procedure we've been doing to come up with all of the associated triads. I recommend you do this by yourself first, and then just use the transcription that's listed to check yourself. So now that you've done all of that, we're just going to use 3 chords. So we're going to take 1, 4, and 5. We'll use this progression that is ubiquitous. It's in virtually any Western genre, from blues to rock to Baroque, classical, soul, pop, funk, you name it, it's there. So it's going to be a very useful one to have under your fingers. Example 6A, we're going to take a 1, 4, 5, 1 chord progression in the key of G, and we're going to play it with our root on top. That means we're going to be in the 3rd position. We're going to have root, 5th, 3rd, root. So that's G, D, B, G. And now we're going to go to our 4 chord, which is C. I always look and see how little I can possibly move each note. So we have G, which is our 5th of our tonic chord, and it's also the root of our 5 chord. So we're going to keep that G in common. We have D, which can move up to our 3rd now of C, right? So we have C, E, and G. So we've got G, E, and now the B, which is the 3rd of the G chord, can move up to C. So now, so the G's stay in common, but then the D and B just move up to C and E. It's really useful to look at it this way because you will just understand things more deeply, and you'll also get more facility with being able to make chord alterations. So if somebody tells you to play a chord with a flat 5th or something, you're not thinking they're just being a jerk about it. You'll just be like, oh, I'll just move my 5th down a half step. So here you are. 1 chord, 4, and now we'll do the same procedure to find our 5 chord. Okay, so here on our 4 chord of C, We could either move it down to the third, but we're going to move it up to the fifth, right? And then we have our root here. So our third of C moves down now to the root of our D chord. And now we're going to have our fifth right here on the G string, and our third of F sharp here. So that note moves down, G moves down to F sharp, and now we have our 5 chord, and then 1. So altogether that sounds like G, C, and then we have D and G. It can be really helpful to think about not just notes that you have in common, but fingers that you can keep in common to make for smooth transitions between chords. So now that you have those down, let's go on to the next set of chords. We're now going to be in the 5th position. And that means that we're going to be on the 3rd on top with our G chord, right? So we have B, and this is going to be what it looks like. We'll go a little bit more quickly because now you got the idea from the first example of this series. So here we have, it's a major chord with a 3rd on top. It is not a difficult chord. I think my skinny fingers make people think it seems really scary. It's not. There's your G chord. Now our C chord, our 4. And now our 5 chord, D, G. So that's example 6B. Example 6C, we're now going to be at the 7th position. So we have G, C, D, and G. You could also play it if you wanted with the 5th on top. So there's your 3rd on top of G, but you could also play it with just your pinky there. So you could play. I happen to just like the little bit of melodic movement you get, but context is everything. You might find either one useful. Example 6D now. We're going to be at the 10th position, and we're going to have a tonic chord with the 5th on top now, because we've got the D in the upper voice. And now, remember this is your major form with the 3rd on top, so there's your C. And then 5 chord, root on top, and then G major. So 1, 4, 5, 1. Okay, so one more set of chords just for those of you who have either a cutaway or feel comfortable being at the 12th position. We're going to start with our 1, so barring at the 12th fret, and then our root on top with our pinky. So G major, C major, D major, G major. So if you want to go back and review example 5 to get familiar with the chords of G major, go ahead and do so. We're now going to be looking at a 2-5-1 chord progression in the key of G major. This is a very useful chord progression. It is all over jazz, popular music in general. Example 7A. We're going to be at the 2nd position. We're going to start with an A minor chord. And now we're going to go to D major, so that's just slight movement. And then G major. You'll notice that as you move between chords that we use as little motion as possible between each voice, which is something we discussed a little bit earlier. That's called voice leading, and it allows for very smooth, graceful transitions between chords. Example 7B is now in the 5th position. So we have A minor, our 2 chord, D major, 5 chord, G major. Example 7C is now in the 7th position. So A minor, D major, G major. And as before, you can play the G major still with that 5th on top. It shares that note in common with the dominant chord. Example 7D. You have A minor, D major, G major. Okay, and so now the extra credit one that isn't printed but is still a good one to have under your fingers. Here's your A minor, and now D major, and G major. Now let's go to the minor mode. So first, write out the chords of the key of E minor. So scale first, and then construct each of the triads as we've done previously. Do it on your own first, and then you can check it against example 8. Example 9a, we're going to do a 1-4-5-1 in the key of E minor, starting at the second position. So you have your E minor, moving to A minor, moving to B minor, and E minor. Now independently, work your way up the neck as we've done in the previous examples and find all of the different chord voicings. For example 9b, we're going to now add in the raised 7th scale degree, which will give us a major 5 chord. So it'll be 1, 4, major 5, 1 in a minor key of E. So that's going to look like E, 1, A, 4. But now for your 5, I'm going to do it B major, 1. And it can be very useful to see. There's your B minor chord, locating that third, that D, and actually watching it move up, refingering as necessary. And really seeing and hearing the relation between those major and minor triads. Example 10 is another chord progression in the key of E minor, and this time we're going to use 2 chords where we have that raised 7th scale degree, which is going to result in the 5 major and also the 2 diminished chord. So our chord progression is going to be E, 1, then your 6th chord, which is C major. Now you're going to have a D sharp diminished, which is like this. And then your 5 chord, which is B major. And then 1. So now if that diminished chord is freaking you out, what you can just remember is that it's your minor chord with just a flatted 5th. So in this case, a D sharp minor chord would look like this, and we have 2 5ths with your pinky and your first finger, so those just move down. It's kind of like the weirdest example because we have the 2 5ths, but just think about it's a minor chord with a flatted 5th, and then just refinger the triad as necessary to make it playable. Now continue those same chords in example 10 and work your way up the neck. For our last example of example 11, we're going to move to the key of A major just for a little variety. And we're going to take a very common chord progression, which is 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. And we're going to look at that. So you've already worked through the 2, 5, 1s in the key of G, so now it's really just a question of changing keys and adding in a 6th chord. Okay, so 1, 6, 2, 5, 1, key of A starting in the second position. So we have 1, which is A, 6, which is F minor, 2, B minor, 5, which is E, and A. So now using that same chord progression, work your way up the neck as we have in all the other examples. So next steps would be to take these chord progressions and transpose them to every key. Try them on the middle 4 strings, try them on the bottom 4 strings. Then, perhaps most importantly, write some of your own chord progressions. Doing so engages you creatively, and being engaged creatively really deepens the learning experience. So try to come up with as many different chord progressions as you can, and I'm sure in the process you will find all sorts of different creative ideas. Because when done with the correct attitude and spirit, gaining knowledge will actually increase inspiration, not stifle it. I thank you for letting me be a small part of your musical journey with this series. Music has one of the highest benefit to risk ratios out there. It has the capacity to delight and inspire and comfort and unite, and yet the worst it really can do is maybe not please you or annoy you. So be fearless as you go along your path of learning and knowledge, knowing that you will harm no one. So invest in your fluency and cultivate your sound and deepen your creativity and write from your highest self, because you never know how it might affect the world positively. So as I send you off on this next phase of your journey, I want to recommend some things that I think are essential reading, things that I have revisited many, many times and I would be happy to share them with you for those of you who want to continue your study. So the first recommendation is Tonal Harmony, and that was my college textbook. I know textbooks are not always the most exciting things to read, but this is the best one that I found for being very solid, very concise, very approachable. Zen Guitar by Philip Toshio Sudo is a daily read for me. I've read and reread it countless times, and you will find no musical or technical examples. It's all about the mindset of making music and being on the long musical journey. Peak by Anders Ericsson is, I think, an incredibly useful, very well-researched book about myths around talent and expertise. Though it is not a self-help book, it's a psychology book, the implications of the research are incredibly empowering, and the bottom line is it's all about whatever you invest will be what you reap. Finally, The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday is a great book about challenges of any sort, and the path of music will, if you're doing it right, give constant new challenges, and how we look at these challenges, what we do with them, and how we overcome them define who we are and who we become. So this is based in age-old Stoic philosophy, and I find it very useful for approaching anything that can be difficult at times.